2016 video game Persona 5 has a group of teenagers known as the Phantom Thieves going around Japan and changing the hearts of despicable public figures by going into metaphysical versions of their consciences. These are called palaces, and inside them you can steal a treasure representing their most deepest desires. A successful excursion of these desires will result in a complete and immediate overhaul of their behavior and atonement for their negative past actions. So, taking this to the logical extreme, could the Phantom Thieves take on the ultimate personification of evil?
Adolf Hitler?
Well, let's find out. And before we begin, talking about this game without spoiling some major plot points is way too difficult, so if you haven't played the game, first of all, how dare you? And secondly, I highly recommend going out and playing it blind. You don't really need to play the other Persona games. It's numbered, but in the same way the Final Fantasy games are, and much like the Final Fantasy series, they share the same enemy types, ability names, item names, that kind of thing. Well, anyways, to start off, let's go over our 10 heroes. Ren Amamiya, codenamed Joker or Trickster, depending on who's addressing him, is the quiet and cocky leader of the Phantom Thieves. After having his reputation tarnished by being falsely accused and arrested for assault, he's sent to the fictional city of Yongen-Jaya to serve a 1-year probation sentence under the supervision of Coffee and Curry Dad, Sojiro Sakura. After accidentally finding out about the hidden world of the metaverse, he uses what happened to him as motivation to find corrupt adults and change their hearts for the better. He is told by the members of the Velvet Room, a place somewhere between dream and reality, that he is a prisoner of fate and must be rehabilitated. This part of the plot can be pretty confusing to newcomers of the series, but if you play the game, it becomes relatively clear what all this means. As for Joker, he wields daggers and handguns. Ryuji Sakamoto, codenamed Skull, is Ren's right-hand man and a former track runner. On the surface, he appears like a delinquent dickhead, but if you crack through his shell, you'll learn that he's a total softie who puts up the front of a badass because he just wants to be accepted. He embraces his title of a troublemaker, and his rebellious side makes his title of a Phantom Thief come naturally to him. He still has his moments of showing pure love for others, although rare, especially in the case of Sophia from Persona 5 Strikers.
Skull?
She's bugged, huh? She's worthless? You got all that from 5 friggin' questions? We're Sophie's friends, and we know she's awesome! She's friggin' amazing! 1,000,000 times better than you! So shut the fuck up, idiot!
He wields blunt weapons and shotguns. Ryuji is based on Ryoma Sakamoto, a samurai who did poorly in school but did very well as a swordsman. Ryoma is mostly portrayed as a rebel who didn't view society or authority in a positive light. Very fitting for Ryuji. Morgana, codenamed Mona, is a cat-like creature found in the metaverse who quickly becomes vital to the mission at hand as he has the most experience in the other world. Not only that, but he can transform himself into a van. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. Personality-wise, he's kind of arrogant, constantly reminding those around him that he is not a cat, despite clearly looking, acting, and sounding like one.
I am not a cat. Say that again and I'll make you regret it. I am not a cat.
Oh, but you're a cat.
I am not a cat.
All right, that's enough, you stupid cat.
But regardless, he proves himself to the team by teaching Ren how to make proper infiltration tools and explaining the metaverse and its mysterious ways to him. He wields scimitars and slingshots. He's also incredibly down bad for An Takamaki, codenamed Panther. She's the sex appeal of the group and an absolute sweetheart. During the beginning of the story, she completely overlooks what the other students are saying about Joker and his past, something she learned from her best friend, Shiho Suzui. Although her attractiveness is far from her only redeeming quality, she does do modeling, which eventually leads to some wacky antics later on in the story. She's also biracial and can speak English fluently. She wields whips, because of course she does, and machine guns. Yusuke Kitagawa, codenamed Fox, is the art-obsessed optimist of the group. After pursuing An, wanting to paint her naked, this makes sense in context, don't worry about it. The Phantom Thieves uncover that the man who's taken him in, Ichiryusei Madarame, has less than stellar intentions, not just for Yusuke, but for all of his past students. Yusuke is rather stoic, but very devoted to his art, and will absolutely explode if he finds out you've been shit-talking something like the world-famous Sayuri painting.
That painting was crafted with a love that simply cannot be found anywhere else. Don't you dare lump it in with that soulless drivel you cobbled together from authors far more talented than you. Hey, you can't! I merely spoke the truth. Now, if you'll excuse me.
Unfortunately for him, he's the epitome of the starving artist type, being very poor and sometimes actually literally starving. He wields katanas and assault rifles. Yusuke is based on Yudamaro Kitagawa, whose story is largely a one-to-one version of Yusuke's. Makoto Nijima, codenamed Queen, is the prim and proper, academic-loving one. It isn't until she gets her persona that her true feelings come out, and all of her aggressive feelings towards the school and other crooked adults manifest into her best asset, that being her deep knowledge of what really goes down behind the scenes, not just in school, but in some of the political justice system due to her incredibly hot sister, Sai Nijima, the lawyer who's been listening to your whole story thus far. She's a certified bad bitch and is incredibly physically strong, and because of this, she often strikes fear into the other Phantom Thieves, especially Ryuji. She uses hand-to-hand combat, namely Aikido, and revolvers. Futaba Sakura, codenamed Oracle, is the technology-loving hacker of the group. Even though she's the youngest of the Phantom Thieves, she is absolutely the smartest, shown by her casually hacking into government websites, something she learned after shutting herself off from the world in her room after being framed for her own mother's death. This plagued her with auditory and visual hallucinations so bad that even the prospect of eye contact would cause panic attacks for her. She sends a change of heart request to the Phantom Thieves about herself, which ends up fixing most of her heartache over it. She doesn't use weapons, but instead plays the support role and assists from behind the scenes, setting up the base right before the team enters the palace. Haru Okumura, codenamed Noir, is the shy and sometimes too nice member of the group. Though she is very good at controlling her emotions, shown by her checking up on the rest of the team after going absent when her father died, or even sympathizing with the real villain of the game, it also leads to her not being able to speak up for herself when push comes to shove, such as when a marriage is arranged for her that she struggles to get out of. But by the end of the story, however, she gets over this and seems to find some kind of sadistic joy in destroying shadows, shown by her Showtime attack with Makoto, or one of my favorite lines in the entire game.
Why is it that I get a shiver of excitement whenever the shadows plead for their lives?
Fittingly, she uses battle axes and grenade launchers. Haru herself is based on Haru Hiratsuka, a feminist who is largely against the idea of women being subservient to their husbands, and would later go on to marry Hiroyoshi Okumura. Goro Akechi, codenamed Crow. If you played the game, you know where this is going. Crow is basically a Scooby-Doo villain taken to the extreme. He puts on a front of a super authentic child prodigy celebrity ace detective who was investigating the Phantom Thief change of heart epidemic in order to win over the public. His persona is even Robin Hood, the famous thief who stole from the rich and gave back to the poor, but in reality, not only was Akechi well aware of what was really going on in the metaverse, he was sent to do it. He has no issues with murder, and yes, actual murder, and you can even see his frightening homicidal tendencies while taking out metaverse enemies. He's essentially Joker's rival, and then friend, and then enemy again, and then temporary friend again, but, well, you get it. He uses futuristic laser guns and laser swords. He's based on Kogoro Akechi, who's basically the Japanese Sherlock Holmes. Kasumi Yoshizawa, codenamed Violet, is the super athletic member of the group, and, well, if you played the game you know this isn't true. The truth is that the real Kasumi died before Joker even met her. It's actually her sister, Sumire, who saved her from dying in a traffic accident, and is taking on her identity as a way to protect her own mental health. Despite suffering from a rather extreme case of multiple personality disorder, she's a valuable asset to the team in the later half of the game, namely when taking on the final boss for reasons that become increasingly obvious as you play. She uses rapiers and old-style lever-action rifles. All 10 of these kids can summon something called a persona, a physical manifestation of the user's personality. These can take the form of demons like a succubus, myths like Mothman, and even gods such as Satan himself. This enhances their physical capabilities to that of superhuman levels, seemingly outside the metaverse as well. Despite this, using one still causes extreme amounts of stress on the user's body, to the point where awakening it for the first time often has the user collapsing from exhaustion. It also isn't exclusive to just humans. In Persona 3, there's a dog that can use one, but I'm getting off track. Alright, now it's time to go over our target. And before we get into it, I know that he was in Persona 2, but if you need the in-game context, it wasn't really him. It was just a disguise used by the main antagonist of that game, which doesn't make it better. I mean, it's still Hitler wielding none other than the spear that killed Jesus Christ in biblical lore. Anyway, Adolf Hitler, born in... God, what the fuck am I doing? Adolf Hitler, born in Austria on April 20th, 1889, was the leader of the or the National Socialist German Workers' Party, more commonly known as the Nazi Party. Worldwide, he is often unanimously cited as one of the most evil people to ever walk this earth, if not straight up evil incarnate. He is responsible for countless war crimes and the deaths of millions in the Holocaust. There isn't much to say that hasn't been taught multiple times in different years of school, but to break it down into simple terms, Fuck this guy. Anyway, the Phantom Thieves have a month to change the heart of Adolf Hitler before he blows his brains out, the only cool thing that this stupid fuck ever did. So can they do it? Well, we run into quite a few issues right off the bat, other than the time difference, but let's just say some time travel wormhole shenanigans happen, so don't worry about that. But the 5 main issues are: 1. How will 10 Japanese teenagers in 1944 Japan even get to Germany? 2. If they do get there, how are a bunch of foreigners during a deadly war-torn Germany gonna find their way to Hitler's palace? 3. If they do find Hitler, how are they gonna get close enough to him? 4. If they do all that, could they even survive? And 5. Let's say that they do succeed, then what? The first problem seems relatively easy since both Akechi and Haru have plenty of money and could foot the bill for a plane, but let's say that they also pay for the best translator they can since they don't speak German, but that leads us to the second problem. In Persona 5, in order to reach their target in the metaverse, the thieves use a special app on their smartphones, speaking a certain keyword and location into it. This usually relates to who they're going after so that they can traverse into an alternate dimension where the target's strongest desires manifest into a palace. The palace is occupied and run by shadow versions of the target and their victims. Inside the palace lies a physical version of their desires called the treasure, which can only appear once the target knows that it's in danger of being taken. The thieves can achieve this by sending a calling card, a literal postcard that says that they're coming after you. So I don't think it needs to be said, but this being World War II, smartphones don't exist, so the metaverse doesn't exist. And given that the main way the Phantom Thieves gain popularity is through an internet fan site, they'd be relatively unknown regardless, but for the sake of this argument, let's assume that Oracle can use her special skill set as an incredibly advanced codebreaker to get the team's phones to work somehow in 1944 and find the code word and the location they need to be in to get to the palace by hacking into the Nazi Party's radio broadcast. Okay, so they've located the man and where they need to be, but can they get close enough to him? For this prompt, I'm trying to give the Phantom Thieves the best chance that I can, so let's say that Akechi or Haru pull some strings with their insane wealth and somehow manage to score an interview with Hitler, or even someone close to him like Heimlich Himmler. During this, I'm sure that Futaba could have the room bugged to get intel that they need, and after all, the Japanese were considered honorary Aryans, so this helps tremendously. So assuming this goes down, they now have access to the palace and how to get into it, but here's the real issue with the question at hand. You see, nobody in Persona 5 was really too dangerous, other than maybe Shido, who used his confidence and charisma to try to overthrow the Japanese government, but his downfall was having a bastard child who ended up foiling his whole plan and helping the Phantom Thieves do it by giving them insider information. And that's all while Shido had the help of God. Yes, actual God. Well, a form of God anyway. God of control, but that's not the point. Let me reiterate. This is 10 high school kids dealing with the physical manifestation of one of, if not the most evil humans to ever exist, to the point where a lot of people use his name as a metaphor for pure evil. So knowing that begs the question, what would Hitler's palace even look like? Well, for this, we're gonna have to look back at all the evil motherfuckers whose hearts we changed back in Persona 5. After all, most of them are based on actual people, and if you want to learn more about the real people behind the atrocities in this game, Lady Virgilia has a wonderful video diving deep into this. Link in the description. Guru Kamishita was a high school PE teacher and volleyball coach who was not so secretly, physically, and sexually abusing his students, only getting away with it since he, being an ex-Olympian, was bringing a lot of money to the school. His palace was the school transformed into a castle, representing the sin of lust, complete with a torture chamber dungeon, overly sexualized high school students, and an outfit for him consisting of a royal cape and crown because he saw himself as the king of the school. And really, it's not entirely wrong for him to think this way, considering that pretty much every student, the students' parents, and even the other teachers knew exactly what was going on, but nobody could really stop him. Even if they tried, they'd just get shut down. When our boy Ryuji stood up to him, he got his leg broken so badly that it permanently affected the way he walked. In real life, Kamishita is based on two people. Masato Ichishiba, a former gold medalist who was sexually abusing the women's judo team at Kyushu University of Nursing and Social Welfare, and Hajime Kimura, a basketball coach who physically abused his students, one so bad that the 17-year-old student took his own life. Ichiriyusai Madarame was an art teacher, while acting humble and prideful on the outside, was actually an evil and plagiaristic manipulator behind closed doors. Even Yusuke, who was living with him, had no idea about this side of him and even threatened the Phantom Thieves over such an idea before being converted to the side of justice. In reality, he was just a shitty artist who took the paintings from his students and lived a lavish lifestyle while the ones he stole from ended up dirt poor. He even let Yusuke's sick mother die just so he could steal the painting she was working on, called the Sayori. This is made even worse by the fact that the image she was portraying was forever thought to be a mystery, until it's eventually revealed that it's a portrait of an infant Yusuke being held by his late mother. His palace, representing the sin of vanity, is his small and cheap home turned into a high-end mansion filled with an audience of fans. Inside, the walls are covered in portraits of all the students he's manipulated over his career, even including one of Yusuke himself. His treasure ended up being the Sayori painting, which is then gifted to LeBlanc as thanks to Sojiro for the hospitality he showed by letting Yusuke stay one night. In real life, he's based on Yoshihiko Wada, a Japanese painter from Kohiku, Japan, who was caught plagiarizing in 2006 after being outed for making around 30 near-identical copies of art from an Italian artist named Alberto Sugi. Also, some inspiration could be made from Muro Samurugachi, a composer who claimed he was deaf and is responsible for one of the most incredible and beautiful musical compositions, that is, the Resident Evil 1 Director's Cut basement theme. Take a listen. It's like sitting on a cloud of razor blades. Junya Kaneshiro was a mafia boss and scam artist from Shibuya who used his vast amount of wealth to scam people, mostly children, into growing his fortune even more. If this doesn't disgust you enough, take into consideration that failing to complete this part of the story results in one of your party members, Makoto, being kidnapped and sold into sex slavery. Kaneshiro eventually gets caught, but Makoto is so mind-broken by all of this that she can only deliriously mutter your name before the police come after you, thinking that you were the one who did this to her. Not only that, but he outright states that when he's done with Makoto, he's coming for her sister next. His palace appears as a giant floating bank representing the sin of gluttony, in which people take the form of living ATMs, as Kaneshiro only sees people as vessels to take money from. His treasure is a solid gold briefcase, but when taken to the real world, they find out that it's filled with fake money. Luckily for them, the briefcase itself is still made of solid gold, so they end up selling that and going to a super expensive sushi restaurant as celebration. Kaneshiro doesn't seem to be based on anyone specifically, but an amalgamation of Japanese crime bosses. Kunikazu Okumura, and fellow party member Haru's father, is the CEO of Okumura Foods and the owner of the Big Bang Burger franchise. After hearing that the Phantom Thieves fan site was repeatedly requesting a change of heart for him, it's revealed that he was increasing his business by all the mental shutdowns. It isn't until after the Phantom Thieves find out that Okumura is forcing an arranged marriage between his daughter Haru and an absolute micro-penis of a human that they go after him. His palace ends up being a space station filled with robotic servants reflecting the way he views all his employees under him, and representing the sin of greed. His treasure turns out to be a model kit of a science fiction space station that he always wanted as a child. It's then revealed that Okumura inherited the business from his father, who wasn't a very good businessman, and debt collectors were a common occurrence in his life. This is what caused him to become so ruthless in the business world, so that he could have whatever he wanted. The model itself, being a collectible, sells for a high price, and the team goes to Destinyland to celebrate. Okumura is based almost directly on Miki Watanabe, the founder of Watami, a chain of sushi bars in Japan. And Sayoshi Shido is probably the closest that we have to an Adolf Hitler, as Shido is an extremely influential politician with an ability to rally the public with his well-worded speeches. In actuality, though, his narcissistic personality and arrogance builds up into a savior complex in which he truly believes that only he can save Japan, and worst of all, the general population believes him. In fact, he's so self-righteous in his delusion of power that anyone who tries to oppose him gets the full brunt of his political power. Case in point, the entire story of the game is set in motion after Ren steps in to stop a drunken Shido from sexually assaulting a woman. After Ren shoves him to the ground, Shido has him arrested. A similar case actually happens in the sequel game Persona 5 Strikers when someone tries to investigate something one of Shido's associates did. Not only this, but he was responsible for the many deaths throughout the game, using his bastard child Akechi to go into the metaverse and assassinate them. After getting what he needed, he intended to have Akechi killed as well. His palace, born from the sin of pride, takes the shape of a massive luxury cruise ship sailing through a completely flooded Japan, representing his intention of crushing everyone that he doesn't care about. His pride is so overwhelming that his treasure is right next to the entrance, although you can't get to it at first. After a boss battle reminiscent of Metal Gear Rising's Senator Armstrong, you change his heart and steal his treasure. A pin in the shape of the ship's wheel, reflecting the view that only he can steer Japan in the right direction. After Shido has his heart changed and confesses to his douchebaggery, the Phantom Thieves are still unsuccessful in changing his popularity, as the general public still thinks he's the only one capable of running Japan. So, this being the case, the only thing left to do is change the heart of the general public by going into the depths of Mementos, or in other words, the palace of everyone's hearts. After making their way to the absolute bottom of Mementos, they're confronted with the Holy Grail. Yes, the actual Holy Grail from Arthurian lore, being controlled by an ancient god named Yaldabaoth. During this, the real world and Mementos fuse into one as it begins to rain blood and massive skeletons appear from the ground. Eventually, and no, I am not exaggerating here, a group of teenagers spend Christmas Eve carving through guardian angels and other Abrahamic entities in order to confront God and kill him with a magical bullet powered by satanic energy. Yes, that is the actual plot. The treasure ends up being the Holy Grail. Well, a smaller version of it anyway. And lastly, Dr. Maruki was a researcher who hid his true intentions by becoming a school counselor at Shujin Academy in order to further his studies into cognitive science. This is a proper case of the villain fully believing himself to be in the right, but not willing to hear any other side of the argument. Through all of this, he's still a patient and characteristically gentle person, as shown by him never once getting angry or combative with the Phantom Thieves until he feels that he absolutely has to. Even during the battle, he seems rather upset that you won't agree to his side. I mean, after all, his goal was to change the world into a perfect utopia, and nobody can feel the pain that he has. Maruki's palace doesn't seem too bad on the surface, but the deeper inside you go, you realize that nobody inside this building has any emotions at all, and that they seem eerily similar to Persona 3's apathy syndrome victims. After the fight, it's revealed that the treasure ends up being a golden torch. Maruki himself steals it before the Phantom Thieves can and becomes a godly being, taking the form of Adam Kadmon, aka the anthropomorphic version of Divine Light. So, knowing all of this, what does this mean for Hitler? Well, the real question is, what did Hitler want? After failing to seize power in a failed coup in Munich, known as the Beer Hall Push, Hitler was thrown in jail where he wrote an autobiography called Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, wherein he blames the Jewish people for pretty much all of the world's problems and his plans to get rid of them via mass extermination. Not only this, but he also calls for the death of anyone he considered weak and impure, which is ironic considered he looked like such a weak fucking moron. Now, I'm not gonna go into how this stupid ass douchebag rose to power, cause I'm not a history buff or anything like that, but just know that he had a lot of influence over the general population of Germany, much like Shido did. So really, a palace like this would essentially be hell on earth, probably a reflection of what was happening inside concentration camps at the time. Hitler saw the Jewish population as nothing more than pests, so the victims inside of his palace would probably look like insects to the group, with cognitive guards spraying them with Zyklon B or something. Not to mention that he had control over an entire army to do his bidding, so threats inside the palace would be unlike anything they've ever fought before, and it's not even close. In Shido's palace, the gang goes around getting letters of approval from some politically powerful guys, but even then, I don't see someone like Heinrich Himmler moving his stance much either. What would Hitler's treasure even be? It's hard to say. Also, the only way to get it to materialize would be for the Phantom Thieves to send a calling card, but would Hitler even see them as a threat? Probably not. He seemed pretty steadfast in his beliefs, and it's incredibly unlikely that a random group of Japanese strangers who Germany was allied with at the time could do much to him during the Second World War. He was also on tons of drugs, like a lot of drugs. So I have no idea what that would even look like in the metaverse, but I can guarantee it isn't pretty. Kamoshida was an abusive pedophile, and he had an entire castle filled with a sex dungeon for school children. This is
Adolf motherfucking Hitler.
In a broader sense, would a group of 10 teenagers be able to stomach tragedy and horror the likes of which has never been seen before? And if I'm being honest, maybe Akechi could, if you take into account his psychopathic tendencies, but even with the power of God and anime on his side, I sincerely doubt that even someone like him could make it through alone. The only way I could see victory happening here is if Futaba contacted the Allied forces, explained who they are and what the metaverse is, and told them where Hitler was so that they could hash out a plan to capture him before he shot himself. They could probably do something like in Sai Nijima's palace when they brought an entire police squad into the metaverse, except with the Allied army. This, of course, blows the lid off the Phantom Thieves being a secret organization, but maybe they could strike a deal with the United States or something. This is Hitler after all. So given this scenario, let's say that Hitler is brought in alive and the Phantom Thieves do their thing and change his heart. Yay, we did it! Right? Nope. Unfortunately, even if Hitler miraculously turned good, his supporters wouldn't just have a change of heart as well. These motherfuckers were crazy. In Persona 5, Mementos is the palace of everyone's hearts, so mirroring Shido, even if successful in defeating Hitler, they'd still have to deal with the aftermath of the palace of the Nazi Party. In a situation where they manage to get through Hitler's palace and come out alive, I think it's safe to assume that our heroes would be so emotionally damaged and scarred from the living nightmare they went through that they would be stuck in a silent thousand-yard stare and in need of immense therapy. Maybe after this they would take Maruki's deal after all. Joker is, by all accounts, what you make of him. By that, I mean he's only as nice or as mean as the player chooses, though if we're going by how he's portrayed in the anime, I think he would lose his cocky demeanor pretty quickly after witnessing the cognition of the man who conjured up the Holocaust. Seeing how in the canon story route, he seemed pretty sturdy and not breaking under heavy police pressure or even under the threat of death, I'd say he makes it pretty far. After all, one of Joker's best traits is keeping his cool under stressful situations. Ryuji doesn't fare much better. While he puts on a tough exterior and never really hesitates to throw himself into a fight, I think it's this headstrong attitude that will ultimately be his downfall. His arrogance will lead him into the palace only to witness horrors that his teenage mind is absolutely not prepared for. Morgana doesn't stand a chance. Ann might be alright for a little while, seeing as she fits Hitler's blonde hair, blue eyes trope, and she's white. Is she white? Not like it would matter, as she's already pretty emotionally beaten after her best friend jumped from the school roof after what Kamoshida did to her. Yusuke might find Hitler's paintings fascinating, since a horrific monster such as Hitler could be into the arts despite the obvious dissonance might be fascinating to him, but ultimately I don't see him surviving too long regardless. Makoto is pretty tough, so she might make it in with Joker until witnessing some gruesome shit that scars her for life. Haru might get pretty far. On the outside she seems all bubbly and cute, but as stated before, she has some twisted practices in the way of stress relief. Futaba probably doesn't even make it to the base. Yoshizawa is already emotionally damaged, so she doesn't stand a chance. Akechi might be fine though, considering he's murdered a few people already. So, to answer the question, could the Phantom Thieves change the heart of Adolf Hitler? Probably not. And even if they did, they would wish they never even considered it. Joker, Queen, Noir, and Crow is our main party, and even then, their mental fortitude might not be enough to make it through the entire palace of the undeniably worst humanity has ever conjured up. Even if they win, they still lose due to the unfathomably horrible lifelong psychological damage that will follow them afterwards. If anything, they might be better off sending in the group from Persona 3, but that's an entirely different can of worms to open. Hey, thanks for watching. So if you want more like this, click subscribe, fuck up that like button, and while you're here, maybe watch one of my other videos like this timeline I did it on the career of Moist Critical, or maybe listen to my music. Anyway, see you next time, fuckers. Also, Kawakami is best girl. If you don't like it, go fuck yourself.